What's going on, everyone? So I went and saw Gretel and Hansel, and before you were like, well, wait, aren't you saying that wrong? Isn't it Hansel and Gretel? Yes, it is wrong. But they switched it for a reason, which I'll get into that in a little bit. Before I dive into the movie, I actually want to just kind of remind everybody what the fairy tale is actually about. Because you got Hansel and Gretel, and if I actually mistakenly call the movie Hansel and Gretel, like, just because they switched it on us. Um, so the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel is written by the Brothers Grimm back in the early 1800s, and it's this concept of this father and stepmother, and there's a famine, and the stepmom convinces the father to take the kids out into the forest and just leave them, on their own, so that way they could survive. Um, Kids overhear it, they pick up all these pebbles, so that way when they go on the trail, they drop all these pebbles along the way. That way they find their way back home. The dad was pleased, stepmother wasn't. So next time the stepmom locks them in their room so they can't gather anything. The only thing that they have to collect is bread. And so what they do is they start breaking the bread down so it could last long enough or whatever. So the next time the dad takes them out, they're dropping bread along the way. Now the problem is birds ate the breadcrumbs. So they couldn't find their way back. They end up so they're starving. They end up seeing this house that's like a gingerbread house, just basically a candy house, which sounds delicious. And so then they go in there. It's a witch. She's actually like feeding them to fatten them up because she plans on eating them. And the witch is asking Gretel to clean the oven or what, get in there. And she knows the plan, so she tricks the witch. The witch gets in there to show her. Gretel closes it. Witch burns to death. And then Hansel and Gretel go home. The stepmother has died since then. The father is pleased to see them, and they live happily ever after. That's the story in a nutshell of Hansel and Gretel that I remember. Have not read this story in quite a long time, but that's the version that I remember. And if that's the version you remember, and in like thinking in the same kind of complex of what I was thinking about this movie, like, oh, this is gonna be cool to see like an updated version of this, because they did release a Hansel and Gretel version with Gemma Arterton and Jeremy Renner. I don't remember how many years ago, but it was kind of more of a sequel. It wasn't the Hansel and Gretel story that we all knew. So when I saw this, I'm like, okay, this is the story. And if, like I mentioned earlier, if that fairy tale is somewhat similar to what you remember, get ready to be depressed, because this movie is nothing like the fairy tale story. I don't know if it was one of those like creative decisions where it's like, okay, well, everybody knows it, they're gonna know what's gonna happen, like, let's just throw in some major curveballs to the story and see how people embrace it. Now, and even by that, what I mean is they even took the liberty to switch the name around. Now, granted, the story kind of maybe revolves around Gretel. Even in the fairy tale, she's the one who messes with the witch. Say that 10 times fast. Messes with the witch, and so maybe them bringing her to be the main character in the film, I'm fine with it. But that is why they switched it for this film, is because Gretel is the older sister, and the whole movie revolves around her. I mean, in every aspect. And she's probably, I don't know, middle teenager kind of age, and probably around that 14 to 16. And then who's played by Sophia Lillis, which she's probably most well known now from her character in the It movies. She's been in the new It movies. She's the kid version of Beverly Marsh. So, and then Hansel, he's probably around an 8-year-old kid. And the movie basically revolves around, Gretel, Hansel, and this witch who's played by Krige. And the movie, though, like I said, is really dark. And there's not a whole lot in the story that makes you think, like, oh, I've seen this before, by any means. It's really not based off the fairy tale. I mean, there's a little bit of the foundation of it, but without giving major spoilers, like, I mean, the famine is a big part of it. That's, you know, and yeah, that's basically it. I was trying to think of some other parts of the, you know, they're threw in some little things here and there to be like, okay, yeah, this is still part of the story or whatever. But realistically, they just went like full creative liberty on this, and the movie's not very long. You know, it's just under an hour and a half, and there's not an after credit scene. So once you see the credits start rolling, you're free to leave, or you can stick around and read all the names that helped bring that movie to you. But I will say the movie's dark. I want to say it's a horror movie. It's a thriller, but I mean it's dark, and I mean you don't see. I mean, depending on how you feel about stuff or whatever, but you do see pentagrams in the movie. I mean, it is a witch. You don't like just sit there and see her like do like chants and that kind of stuff. But I mean, there's some things implied. Well, there is one scene, oh, there's two scenes for sure, that there maybe are a couple of those moments and stuff. So they definitely went more that route with this film, and went for like the creepy factor, but it's not anything like you expect. I mean, because they went full board with that. The story is literally about Gretel and becoming more of her, you know, transition to a woman, and where she's at in that kind of life. And I don't want to explain too much more on that, but like I said, the story just isn't like anything you've ever seen or read before, or at least I haven't. And therefore, for me, I didn't like it. I give them creds for trying to do something creative and something new. For me personally, I just feel like they missed the mark drastically, and a little bit confusing. Afterwards, like I really had to start thinking about stuff like, okay, wait, how does this line up with this? And so it was a movie that I had to think about a little bit afterwards, just to try and connect all the pieces. So, in my opinion, if you are a fan of the Hansel and Gretel story, chances are you're not gonna like Gretel and Hansel, especially if you don't like, you know, the dark witchcraft kind of movies or whatever, because this movie does dive into that way more than I was expecting. Like I said, I was expecting to see a Hansel and Gretel story, but instead I saw this Gretel and Hansel movie. Hansel. But anyways, this movie, yeah, is directed by Perkins, and yeah, there it is. It's PG-13 for obviously some disturbing scenes and implied witchcraft. There is a drug scene. They're in the forest, involves food. That's all I'm going to tell you. Give you a little bit of hint on that. It's kind of random, especially like the whole movie's kind of dark, and then there's this one random scene. But there's that. So thank you guys so much for watching this. Let me know in the comments, like if you saw it, did you actually like it? Did you like the fairy tale? Like, let me know what you thought. Yeah, it was just a big miss for me, unfortunately. And like I'm a 2 out of 5. I guess I never kind of said that. But if you like this video, hit the like button, and like always, be sure to subscribe. That way you're notified for my future movie reviews. Thank you guys.